All right. Hey, welcome to Life in Red Podcast, lifeinredpodcast.com, at Life in Red Podcast on Instagram and Life in Red Pod on Twitter. My guest today, we had a really interesting and deep conversation that kind of went into a whole bunch of things about life. He is an author. His book is now out. Right now it's on Amazon. You can check it out. It's called The Last Alias, True Stories and a Tale That Might Be. And it's kind of a chronicle of his life, which really, I mean, it encompasses a lot. He's a former ad man. He's a former director and producer of anime. And then he wrote this book. And we talk about a lot of things, including, his struggles, his triumphs, addiction, coming out as gay to his family, a bunch of different things. And I thought it was a really good, all-encompassing conversation on kind of what life can be. You can follow him on Twitter. You can follow him and go to his website. It is Ste7Foster.com. Steven with a 7 instead of the V. So please give it up for my guest, Ste7en Foster.
You take the red pill, you stay in Wonderland, and I show you how deep the rabbit hole goes.
Welcome to Life in Red.
All right, boom. Here we go. Mr. Ste7en Foster, my man, thank you so much for joining me.
Thank you for inviting me. It's fun. I like your podcast a lot.
Thank you. Yeah, when you reached out, we were joking off mic. I was like, I thought it was like a spam mail or something, but to connect with you, I think it's really cool. And I think you've lived enough lifetimes almost for one person over and over again. You're a former ad man. You've worked in anime, which I know we'll get into all that stuff, but you have a book. And my first question is, you've lived all these different experiences in a bunch of different industries. Like, why did you decide now was the time to put it out in a book?
I've had some like hard knocks right about the end of my anime career. I had some things happen and that basically just kind of threw me for a loop. And after the wreckage, I didn't know who I was anymore. And when I went looking for myself, I thought I would find like one neat person, and there was this entity there, a me. And I didn't find me. I found all these shadows of me, these fragments, these aliases, as it were. And not the true me, not the whole me. And so I thought the real me had to be hiding behind all these. So I would locate and kind of like psychically find each of those personas that I would use and then get those away. And hopefully behind that would be the real me. Because the theory basically is like, you're not really the same person to your mom as you are to your lover, as you are to your employer, as you are to your dad. I mean, it's so, which one of those is the real us, or is it not any of those? It's someone else we don't know. And I think it's most of the times, I think it's someone we don't know.
That's a really good point. The many aspects of who we are, because I know at work, as much as I like to think so, I'm more professional than on my podcast. I'm a little more loosey-goosey. So it's a really good point that there's so many facets to just one person. In your description, you have, you saw 23 different versions of yourself, these identities that you kind of identified. What were some of those? What were like maybe the bigger ones that like stood out for you?
Well, I identify with my job like I think a lot of people do. I don't know, that may be an American thing. I don't know, but so writer, director, producer, that's definitely one side of me. I'm a father, so that's one. I'm gay, so that's another one. And I've been like heroic in some places. I've been a good friend in other places. And that's so a lot of those like that. Yeah, like those and more. And there's some that I'm not real proud of that I wish there wouldn't be in the book. There's a couple of them that like the Other Man and the Punisher I wish weren't in the book. But if I was going to be honest about the concept about looking for yourself, I had to be honest about it and show everybody.
So, I mean, that must be a really hard kind of thing to do. I know with myself, and I'm very outspoken about my own mental health and the goods, the bads, the really, the really bad stuff. But I still don't share everything. Not there are still certain aspects of myself that I haven't shared online, even though I'm very candid and open about it. How hard was that decision to, like you said, go into these things that you really aren't proud of in great detail, knowing kind of in the climate, especially now that we're in, that could very much be perceived as, something maybe negative or come back to haunt you? Like, what went into that thought process and how difficult was it for you?
God, that's such a good question. It was kind of like I didn't have any other choice. If this isn't really the book I wanted to write, I dreamt about writing a fiction or a novel or anything, and then these are the stories that just wouldn't leave me alone. And so I followed those to the path that they led me down. But I didn't want to. Oh God, I didn't want to be embarrassed, but then I just realized that was just another part of me that was like taking over the not to be embarrassed part. It was like my ego instead of being truthful. I mean, have you ever been with someone, and I think this is how we are, is that we're with someone and we're talking, and then we wish, oh, I wish I could tell them this. I just wish I could give a little bit more honesty about this. And then we don't, we just hold that back. And if we would be honest with that, the person would be usually accepting. It's like, I think I'm crazy, but then I ask my friends, do you feel this way? And they're all like, yes. They're all like, exactly. But you in your own head, you think you're alone. You think you're the only one who feels these things. And that's just a lonely existence. And I thought if I would be honest about mine, then other people could be honest about theirs, and they'd read the book and they wouldn't feel so alone.
That's true. I think we all have a little bit of, I don't want to say darkness, but maybe aspects of ourselves, like you said, that are maybe less than favorable. And a lot of us do a really good job on either suppressing that or hiding it. And I think that might affect us in deeper ways than we might think. That affects us in this day-to-day life that we try to lead, where we're not truly our authentic selves. And to me, that's kind of sounds like what you were grappling with.
Yeah, very close to that. I mean, and it's even more complicated because of COVID. I mean, COVID's just thrown us all for a loop. And I put a preface in the book because I wrote it pre-COVID, and I put a preface on it that said, like, I don't know if this is the right time to write a book about finding yourself. And then a couple of reviewers and readers have said, like, no, this is the perfect time to be thinking about who you are, because we're all having to rethink who we are, because we're all, pardon my language, we're all fucked. I mean, we're just all fucked. I mean, it's horrible. It's just awful. I just keep thinking, like, when is this going to end? And it's like, I don't think it's going to for a while.
Yeah.
Be stuck with yourself for a long time. That's
it, right? Thing. There's so many of us, especially those who, young people, especially, that we maybe don't live with somebody else. We might live on our own. We might have roommates, which is fine. But a lot of us have been forced to isolate and
yes.
be alone with our own thoughts without sort of the distractions that normal everyday could bring us. And I'm not saying distractions negatively, but like, going out with your friends for a drink or hanging out or going and having a big family gathering or to the bar, whatever that might be.
Delightful things.
Yeah. Now we're forced to sit here. And I know I struggle with this a lot, but like sitting there with myself and my own thoughts and being, it almost is that like, okay, who am I? And now I've like explored all these different parts because I've had the time to really sit there and think about it, that aren't necessarily like, it's given me a chance to work on myself, I guess, basically, which is good, but that's some scary and hard work as well. And you're right that I think we're all in a way going through that right now, just because everything is especially so uncertain and we don't know what's going to bring. And there's so much volatility. And I mean, especially where you are, with the state of the election and kind of how everything's going with that. Like, it's just there's a lot of unknowns.
Yeah, it's crazy. It's crazy. It seems like everything's converging at once, and I really feel bad for. Although I think there are great white hope, is the kids. I mean, how do teenagers, and especially one's college, who are they're graduating and they're ready to go out into the world, and they had it tough with a shitty economy, but now they have no economy and everything's going bad. And what do you do? What do these guys do? I just feel so bad for them. And that's one of the reasons I wrote the book was I hope that if they could just see this guy struggling and the hell that I went through, that and this sounds so new agey, hopeful shit. I hate that, but you somehow you come out the other side. And if you would have asked me this 3 years ago, I would have told you you were insane, that there was no way I would be able to come out of it, and that I wasn't going to be that person anymore. But it happened. I lived it.
Mm-hmm. So getting back into that kind of the book. So, I mean, you broke it down very interestingly that every chapter is kind of like written by one of these personas that you've kind of developed, and you've broken it into these stories. It's like, it's you, but it's all these different people. And I mean, it's so multifaceted. A writer, like you said, the producer, director, a man of faith, as a gay man, a survivor, all these different things. I want to talk about three, because I know you mentioned that there was kind of like these three, I guess, traumatic or pinnacle moments in your life that kind of really steered the direction of your life. What was the first one? What was the first life event that really set you on the path into where you are now?
I was going along. I was at a career high. Everything was great. Everything was wonderful. And I had these strange pains that were occurring. And I just ignored them and was blowing it off. And then after a while, they would become worse. And I had a joke about it. I was like, oh, someone's got the voodoo doll, because that's what it felt like, someone stabbing me. And then a friend of mine said, I'm so sick of you yelling just in the middle, because I would get a pain. I go like, ah. And she was like, you need to go to the doctor. And so I was diagnosed with rheumatoid arthritis. And that's when everything went to hell. And then everything fed off of that. I had mental illness. I got depressed. I had drug addiction. It was a triple whammy, and I lost my career, and it wasn't fun. You know what, Ryan? It wasn't fun.
Yeah, no. I mean, we laugh about it, but that's heavy stuff, and that goes. I think we're seeing that a lot now, and just even going back to COVID. I know I read an article yesterday that how opioid addiction and overdosing has skyrocketed since the pandemic, right? Because even going back to what we were talking about, being alone with ourselves, people being in pain, all these different things. If you don't mind, and we can totally skip it into just whatever, but I'm curious, what led to the addiction? Was there perhaps issues beforehand, and then it just kind of slowly snowballed, or was it like an immediate thing? You maybe took something from pain and then it kind of just got a little out of control.
Yeah, that's exactly how it was. I think maybe I was always primed, or I was mentally ill before, and this is all it took to like be the catalyst to turn everything. But as far as the drugs go, I was with somebody. I was hooked up with a guy, and I don't usually do drugs with anybody I'm tricking with, or any guy anybody I'm dating. Let's put the nicer way of saying it, dating. And he said he was going to get high, and I was like, no thanks for that. And he said, it'll take your pain away. And I was like, that's exactly what I'm looking for. And then I did that, and to keep working and to not hurt anymore.
Did people know right away? Was it very obvious, or were you able to sort of maintain that day-to-day life in your career, and then it just kind of escalated, or like was it a pretty rapid downfall?
No, for a while I was able to like,
Right.
control it, and it was doing it. And then I couldn't, I'd get just manic, and it was really unpleasant. And it was really not good. It just wasn't good. I don't know. Have you ever had anything like that?
I haven't. No, I've been fortunate that I
Yeah,
don't.
that's good. Yeah, and I never thought it would happen to me either. And
I
it's just,
that's the point right there, though. That I think we have that awful stigma and perception of drug addicts and what that is, and we're like, oh well, maybe they have trauma as a kid and then they ended up here, that we kind of think of them as like the lower class of society, when really, exactly as you said, you were a successful businessman, like accolades, awards, and you just found something that could numb pain from a situation that you had zero control over, and then it took over. Like, I think that's so important for people to understand about addiction and about mental illness in general, that I think I would say of most people who become addicts, especially to pain medication and opioids and alcohol, that they never think it would be them. And there was no maybe thing that led up to that point. It happened for a certain reason. And then all of a sudden, before you know it, oh shit, look where I am now.
you're exactly right. I don't know why. I don't know if it's innate human nature or what, but we look at the mentally ill, the poor, anyone struggling, that it's a character flaw within them, or something that they've done wrong, or from a religious aspect, because I'm a Christian, not a right wing Republican evangelical, not that kind of thing, but a Christian. And we look at them as like, well, obviously they deserve it. They haven't done anything. And if you watch, sorry to offend anybody, but you watch Republicans give a quote, and they'll be very quick to say, well, what did Jared Kushner say? Something about like, if you're black, they don't want to like succeed. It's like their thing that
Yeah.
will fix it. And you just come from this place of judgment. And I don't know if that's human nature, or maybe it's our own fear that we could be like that in a second.
Mm-hmm.
I have no idea what it is, but we all seem to do it. And there's nothing wrong with it.
Yeah. So, are you healthy now? Are you like, is everything kind of corrected itself? And how did you get there? How did you go from, losing it all to kind of building back the pieces?
Actually, I probably would have died if it wouldn't have been for friends. They found me in my house. I had the windows, all the front windows were boarded up with plywood and drywall hammered to the windows so you can see anything.
Oh, wow.
And then, and a friend came over, and he came in and he saw it, and he was like, we're in trouble. And he called a good friend of mine, and they got me in touch with some doctors and therapy, and it was through therapy. And so I got clean. The drug thing wasn't really that hard. It was the rest of it. But the depression lasted 2-3 years. And there were just days where I was just like, just every day crying. Every single day. I look at my face and I go like, I looked okay before this happened, and now 2 years of solid crying. I don't have bags under my eyes. I have lines of luggage. It's just crazy. but it's just, and then through intense therapy and honesty and time, that's the thing that sucks, is that you want things to be over tomorrow. And rarely does that happen. Things take time.
It's true. I've mentioned that a numerous amount of times in so many different kind of contexts, whether that's like racial change or mental illness change, reform, all those types of things. That the unfortunate part is it takes time and a lot of work. And yeah, you want the answer right away. And that's really difficult. I'm wondering,
which is really hard.
Yeah, go ahead.
What's really tough about being young is that you're just accelerated, and you want everything now and everything tomorrow. And it's weird because now I'm like almost 60, and I just want to like reach out to all these kids and go like, you're not going to understand this at all. You're not going to believe me at all. But it's going to take some time. What you're thinking now isn't going to be the way you are, and that every day is precious, and you're going to, and it's just, and they're not going to believe me. So I hope under 30 reads the book, because I want them to know that it's, okay, the one thing, there's a couple of chapters in the book that talk about my parents, and the one thing, which I don't talk about in the book, that I always had against my parents is they never sat me down when I was a teenager and told me life is going to kick you in the teeth. And when it does, you need to react thusly, or you need to be this way, or you need to be that way. And so then when I was walking around like a dumbass and life did hit me, I was like, what the fuck is this? What the fuck is happening? And I just, it was always like a disservice. I probably have erred on the wrong side and told my kids that life is terrible and horrible and you better be ready for it. But I don't know. Did your parents tell you that? Were you ready for it when it happened, when life came?
Yes and no. My parents did they did a good job. They prepared me. My parents and I have always had a fantastic open relationship, and even more so now as I'm older. But at the time when I was 16, they were basically like, anything you want, you're gonna have to pay for. Anything you need until you're out 18 and out of the house, we'll provide. So when I was 16, I had to get a job, and if I wanted to get food or go with my friends, like I had to pay for it myself. And I think at the time I'm like, this is bullshit, because like my friend, my friends, I had some friends that were, their parents would pay for everything, and so at the time I'm like, well, what the hell's going on? Why do I have to do it the hard way? But like you said, like as a young person, kind of growing up to where you are now, that you don't understand it in the moment, but in hindsight, when you can look back, you're like, oh yeah, okay, like, yeah, I guess that was good. Thanks, mom and dad.
And that's so hard, because then you have to look at it and go like, you have to look at yourself and go, I was fucking wrong. I didn't know what I was saying, and they were right. And that's a hard thing to do. It's hard. I think that's like a lot of this issue with Trump lovers, and that you're humiliated, and you have to like say you were wrong, and people just don't like admitting you were wrong, or saying that your hero's not a hero, or that the guy that was on trial you believed in is like, well, no, he did kill someone, and you're like, well, I was wrong to believe that. And I mean, it's difficult. Our emotions just play such a key role in us, and I think that we don't know our emotions as intimately as we should, because we don't know ourselves as intimately as we should.
That is 100% true. And the big thing too is what I'm kind of an advocate for is this path to redemption. Now, I mean, that takes on a lot of different forms, and I think there's varying levels, but you look at people who have made mistakes in the past that get crucified for it now, whether justly, unjustly, that's not for me to decide. But I think if we want people to make amends and to be better people and to grow and change, we need to have some sort of empathy and sympathy for these people who understand that they've made mistakes and are now working to correct those wrongs. I look at people who were, skinheads, neo-Nazis, members of the KKK, who have now come around and are trying to keep people from going into those organizations using their own experience. I'm like, you were basically like the worst type of person in the world, but now you're doing some good and you're working hard to do good. Does that make you a bad person now? Some people would say yes, some people would say no, and there's a lot of debate, but I think we need to leave room for people to be like, okay, you know what? I fucked up. Here's what I'm doing to make it better. And people are like, okay, like good. Like we maybe not forgive depending what you did, but we can at least move forward and create a space where, you're the rest of your life isn't necessarily going to be completely over and harmed from it.
Exactly. And the best example of that has been, and I'm not going to get their names right, but the woman in Central Park, the white chick,
right,
who was with the dog, and then she yelled at the black guy. The black guy said, "Can you please put your dog on a leash?" And she was like, "No." And then she called the police. She was like, "There's a black man harassing me. He's going to," and then the storm came down on her, and everyone with legitimacy were like, "You're a bitch. You're horrible. You're the worst person in the world." And everyone ganged on it was like Smear the Queer. We all jump on her and we beat her up. And the black guy who was offended was like, "I'm not pressing charges. She's already been punished enough. You guys have been horrible to her. Just let her go. I'm not doing anything to her." And that was such a loving gesture. It was like, okay, she's been spanked. Everybody lighten up and give her a break. And I thought that was just such a beautiful and very Christian thing to do. To say,
it's interesting that you bring up the Christian thing to do. Just because, there's that, I mean, Christianity gets a very bad rap, as I'm sure you know.
Oh, I told my mom once, I said, "I'm more in the closet about being a Christian than I'm a faggot."
I mean, that's something to say.
Well, they're terrible. But go ahead. What were you saying?
No, go ahead, please.
Oh, they're horrible. That's why I don't tell people I'm a Christian, because it's just like, I always think I'm going to be the worst representative of it. And I think maybe I'm the best representative of it, but the media forward Christians we get are the ones who are like hateful and mean and judgmental. And, they vote on these policies that are like, "Do you want to feed the poor?" "No, we don't want to feed the poor. We don't want no welfare check." And everything is just so awful and mean. And so, and not anything like Christ said. I mean, he was like, if you have something, cleave it to the other and give your half to someone else who doesn't have it. And feed the poor and heal the sick and be there with, I think it was a metaphor, but prostitutes. You be there with the people that you don't think are the right ones of society, and that's who you minister to. That's who you bless, and that's who you hang out with. And the religious right just seems to be anathema to that. It doesn't compute with them. They don't like it. It bothers them. And I think they just have Gia Tolentino is a really good writer for The New Yorker. And she just has a book coming out, or had a book come out it's called Mirror Image or something. And she has a really good treatise on that, about how the religious right is very judgmental and it's all covering for any other of their sins. It's just really interesting to me. I'm sorry that folks are...
Oh, that's okay. I'm curious. Do you feel...
Sorry.
Do you feel there is a contradiction in being gay and Christian? Do you feel kind of like an internal pull, being like, is this correct? Is this right? Because there's so much kind of confusion, and especially from me who doesn't understand being either, that seem to pull away from each other when it comes to those two subjects.
That's such a good question. And it's so true to the you're still talking. I'm sorry. I did. I had a really long time. That's probably why I got married, because I was influenced by religion, and I thought it was wrong. And I mean, I was probably 90-10 bisexual, but I shouldn't have been married. But I did love my wife, and I thought it was the right thing. And then after a while, it was like, do I do the thing I think is right, or do I live truth, which is probably more holy or more honorable than doing what you think is right? So I just had to come out, and just was like, I was miserable. And so I became, somehow God and I wound up having a peace about it. He doesn't seem to be all freaked out about it. And I seem okay with it now too. So I don't know. It's just, and you wouldn't think that by the example of the religious right. They just don't see that kind of thing. But like, can I ask you a question? Really, is that bad? Am I turning the interview on wrong? But can I ask you a question?
Yeah, for sure. It's a conversation, not an interview.
Okay, cool. So like, you said Christianity and homosexuality were like neither of you, but like I talk to God like all the time, all day. I mean, I just turn to him all the time, whether it's good stuff, good shit. I was like, oh my God, you're so awesome. Thanks so much. Or bad shit. I'm like, Lord, what the fuck is going on? I'm pissed. Where do you, if you don't, because I would just die if I didn't have that I didn't have someone to turn to and just talk to all day or whatever like that. And I know it sounds stupid or gay or weird, but what do you do with all that energy and those questions? And even though I don't get a lot of mine answered, there's something wonderful about knowing there's someone there listening to me ask them. If that makes any sense.
I see what you're saying. And it's funny, I was just listening to an interview with Matthew McConaughey, and he brought up something similar to what you were talking about. And I think, while I am not religious, I don't have a inclining to believing or not believing in God or gods or, whatever religion people practice. I really appreciate the philosophy and the history of it. And I love learning about it. I just don't have a personal belief or practice in it. I kind of just tend to live my life. I guess to answer your question, I talk to myself. I have internal dialogues about everything. Like, did I say the right thing? Did I do this right? Did I do this wrong? Should I do this? Part of that is, my mental illness and the anxiety and going back on all these different scenarios in my life, being like, I wish I did that different. I wish I did this instead. But what I really try to do is, okay, here's the mistakes I've made. Here's the mistakes I'm making. Here's what I've learned from it, and making sure I implement that into the rest of my life as I move forward. And I do that for my career, for my podcast, for my relationships. We were talking just off mic about, my girlfriend and I breaking up at the pandemic. It's me looking back on those things and, okay, where did I go wrong? What did I do? What do I wish I did differently? And then making sure that in the future relationships that I remember what I've done and want to correct, and then make sure I do that in the future. So I don't think it's a lot different than, I guess, talking to God. I talk to, maybe I am talking to God in some subconscious way.
Yeah. I just, as soon as you said that, I was like, holy shit, maybe that's what he's doing. I didn't never see that until you said it. That was
exactly.
Amazing.
So, maybe that's it. I don't know, but I'm addressing myself with myself and just having these internal talks. And
can I ask about the girlfriend? Like,
sure.
how long were you all together?
It was only a year and a half. I say only, but
that's a long time.
I don't know how to say that. I don't want to put anybody on the spot, but I thought it would last a lot longer. I'll just say that.
Did you share with her? Were you honest with? I was talking with a friend of my son's the other day, and I asked him a couple questions, and my son was like, do you see what I have to put up with? And he was like saying that, asking me questions. And but I'd known this guy a little bit, enough to fuck with him, that he's a very quiet guy. He doesn't talk a lot. But I asked him questions, and he started talking about this girl, and we gave me answers, and I'd ask him back and forth. And after I asked him what went wrong in his relationship, and he looked kind of like shell-shocked. And he says, well, I'm not really honest with her, and then she really doesn't share stuff with me, and then all we're left with is the stuff we don't like about each other, and it just gradually ends. And I was like, that's so sad. And he said, that's not, oh, fuck.
Popular man.
And he said, that's, I know, right? It's my parents, because it's all fucking sales calls, of course. But he said that that was the most he talked since COVID started. And I was like, is that because we're not asking the questions? Are we not relating to people? Were you really, was he not honest with her? And that's why, I mean, he basically said that. He said that he didn't share, so she didn't share either, and they had nothing left. So when you were with your girlfriend, were you honest about stuff? I mean, did you ever like this? Did you ever tell her like, fuck, I got this thing to do tomorrow and I'm really nervous about it. I'm really afraid. What do I do? Were you that vulnerable? Did you do that kind of stuff?
No, I was honest. Yes, I would talk about that stuff. But when I wasn't as honest in some cases as I should have been. So as an open person, you'd think I would share everything, no problem. But that wasn't always the case. And this is an issue I have, not just in that relationship, but with everything, that even though I share and I have no problem being honest and talking about things, there are things I keep to myself in certain situations because I don't want to be a burden. I don't want to put this onto somebody else because I maybe they're having a bad day and I had a really bad day, but I'm like, you know what? Like, this isn't about me. I'll make it about them. And it has affected my relationships in a lot of different senses. So, that's the thing I'm trying to work through in my own life and my own therapy and everything, because it's one of those things where me not trying to be a burden makes me almost a burden, or it breaks trust, or it breaks a bond. And even though in the moment I think I'm doing the right thing, I look back and I'm like, fuck, I shouldn't have done that, or I should have said something, but and that's what I mean by living and learning. I'm fortunate that I can recognize a lot of things about myself and think very cerebrally, that I know when I make a mistake and I can hear criticism and correct it. So I can reflect a lot and, try to make it better in the future and other things. But that's also kind of how my brain works, that it just always kind of is telling me I'm not good enough. And it don't do this because they're going to hate you for it or whatever, or feeling very insecure in the relationship, being like, they hate me or they're mad at me. Oh, this and that, even though I know they're not, but I always just hold that thought anyway, or that it's going to end at any time. So, I mean, that's been a problem since I've been 18. So it's not easy to get over.
I think we withhold that kind of thing. And like, again, that's why I wrote the book, was so I figured if I could be honest, I addressed my sexual self in the book. And there's a warning right before you hit that chapter that says, like, what you're about to read is graphic. So if you should, maybe if you're sensitive readers, should move to the next chapter. And I put that in there. I didn't want to. On the eve of publication, I almost killed it because I didn't want it to be in there. But a couple of girlfriends said, you have to put it in there because it's the most honest one and a bunch of honest stories, and every girl will relate to this. And I think we don't share these. I figured if I could share these things, then maybe other people would feel better about sharing their things. And to your point, you said if you're not sharing, it was almost like a break in the relationship, or you were hurting the relationship. And I don't think it's quite that didactic. I think it's more that you really do a disservice to both parties, because if you flip it, if you knew that someone was hurting your friend and they didn't share it with you, you would feel just like a loss. I mean, you just like, why wouldn't you? Because I think as people, I think that's just our nature and our spirit. We want to minister to each other. We want to help each other. And that's just the way we're built. That's just the way we're made. And when we withhold that, we personally don't get the opportunity to be healed, and they don't have the opportunity to be an instrument of God to heal you, which is, to me, the best excuse for being honest and sharing with someone. Even though it's tough and even though it's hard, I just find 9 times out of 10, they're right with you and they totally understand what you're saying. When you thought you were a freak, they're like, no, they totally get it. And they're like equally as recognition of it.
One of my favorite quotes is, treat yourself as if you were someone you loved. And I've tried to implement that in my life, because so many times, like you just said, if if I knew how much, or if anybody, if we knew how much we were hurting somebody with maybe something that we thought was protecting them, maybe that would be different. But we're so stuck in that moment that, like it's almost like help yourself, help that other person, and you can really fix it up. And so many instances that we don't do that, and it ends up falling apart, and happens to so many different people of all sorts of different, sexual preferences. Like, I think might just be like an innate human feature of how we interact and communicate.
I think so too. And it's really weird if I can be so goofy or stupid or whatever. I mean, like when you're talking, and your audience probably can't, they don't know this because it's audio, but I can see you, but you can't see me. And so I'm seeing you talk. And when you say these things, I have this like huge, and it may be because I'm a dad. I don't know, but I just want to have this big, like my arms want to grab you and hold you and say like, it's okay. And just, there's this huge in my heart caring that I have for you right now, that I think just is because like I just met you, I'm talking with you, and it only takes, what we've been talking, like 10 minutes or 20 minutes. And it's like, I want to help you. I want to know you better. I want to relate to you. I want to solve anything I can for you. I just want to be there for you. And I think that's how we are as people. But we don't think people are like that. We're afraid they're going to judge us. They're going to do this. And because we judge a lot in society, but I don't think that's really our nature. I think our nature is more to be helpful and to understand and to lift each other up.
No, absolutely. You're right. I want to, it's not the greatest segue, but I did want to transition because I did have a question going back a little bit. When
Sure.
you, like you said, decided to live free and live who you were, how did that affect your family and your kids? That's always something that I've always been kind of curious about, especially when you have people like Caitlyn Jenner or people of that nature, where I don't know if the family always knew, but I'm just curious on how that impacted your family and how it impacted you.
My kids were really great about it. But I came to the decision when they were very young. It was like, if I leave now, they'll be babies. And if I leave in 10 years, they'll be very cognizant of this, and they'll be very aware of a family being ripped apart and mommy and daddy splitting. But if I do it now, yes, I'm going to fuck her and leave her with 2 kids that are very young, but it's better for the kids. And so I gave her the house, the car, everything. And so we did that. My parents were and there's a story in the book about it. They found out I was gay because I was in a coma once. And the doctor said, well, he got this because he's gay. The other doctors came in and said, no, that's not why he got it. But they were not very thrilled about it, but never talked about it. They were very reserved about it. But then one day we were in the kitchen, this kitchen that I'm sitting in right now. And my mom said, you know what? We were not very supportive when you came out. We didn't understand it. We had a hard time with it. And I just want to say that your dad and I are sorry about that. And I would never have thought that would have had an impact on me. I would have thought that would have been bullshit. I wouldn't care. And it just was like, holy shit, that's what I was dying to hear. So it's just, again, when you live your truth, God, this sounds like such a fucking greeting card. It sounds so gay. But it's like, if you live your truth, it's just like Jesus said, the truth will set you free. It's weird. It's weird.
That's good.
So did that answer your question?
It is, yeah. And, I just always, you hear so many different stories and reactions on how that is. And I just couldn't imagine being, I don't know if you felt trapped, if that's the right word, but I can't imagine, you're living one life when really you have this, who you are, like you're kind of like suppressed, but now you also have responsibilities. Like now you have people depending on you, and that emotional kind of, battle. And I'm going back to just what we were talking about. I'm sure you use talking with God and everything to lead you to this decision, but it's just, I mean, it's hard. I just, to even put it lightly, for me, imagining it like that, I couldn't just imagine how hard it must have been.
Well, and I think like the books, I think that's like what the book talks about, is that we segment ourselves, we show this person, and we embrace the husband, like 50s angle, they're upstanding and they love kids and they love the wife, but maybe they want to be a little bit wilder. Maybe they want to do this. Maybe they want to do that. But they put forth this persona because that's the one that's accepted. That's the one they think that they need. And they rely on that at the expense of maybe the self or the housewife who really wants to live. I want to go back to work, or I want to do this. But she's like, I need to be the wife and the mother. And so I show this side to my family, but I don't show them the real me. An artist or painter or a politician, anything. And that's just a trap we get into. We fall into these roles and we find it's better or easier or more familiar if we just keep living those roles instead of looking inside and saying, well, this may not be totally correct. I just got that through this conversation, that I didn't have that insight before. Which is what I love about the book, is that you start talking with people about it and you wind up, the stories are about me in the book. It's a book about me. But everyone winds up seeing themselves in the stories and reflecting on them on their own selves, which is what I hoped so much for, and that's what's happening.
That's awesome. I'm curious about, so you have a chapter called The Part of It. And it says, you're in New York, should have stayed home. What happened in New York?
I was there for business. I was doing a DVD extra with a cast of Farscape, a science fiction show that was on Sci-Fi Channel, and it was huge. And I'd always dreamed of New York. I mean, since I was a little kid, I just thought it was fantastic. I was like, elevators that like took you to trains and underground, and the mad delights, everything just intrigued me. And then I was there and I was living the dream, and I went to the Roxy and got high and I just danced, and everything was perfect. It was perfect. And then in the morning I was like, I was going to miss my flight. And then I'm talking to the secretary at the studio, and she's like, are you okay? And I'm like, what are you talking about? And she tells me a plane crashed into a building in New York. And I'm like, what? And so I turn on the television and I see the second plane hitting at that time. And that was my very first time in New York. And so it was like my dream turned into my nightmare.
Wow. Okay. That's something.
So spoiler alert, I shouldn't have told it because that's a twist in the book and the story in the book. But that's what that is. But the book's a lot like it. There are a lot of twists in the book.
Yeah. So I did want to touch on, because you are most known for this anime show called Ghost Stories. What is that process been like? Like, because this has really taken on a life of its own much later than it aired. Is that correct?
Yeah, I did it in 2005, and then 15 years later, it winds up being this fans or people, or I don't know who, but they start downloading or uploading things to YouTube, whole episodes, but then it would be just like clips and compilation reels and then reactions of people, especially Black people, watching the show. And because it's very un-PC, it offends everybody. I took a children's show that bombed in Japan and turned it into a foul-mouthed, celebrity bashing, political charged comedy that was offensive to everyone. And it became a huge hit on the internet. It has, like, I don't know, one video is just about one joke, and it had 1.5 million views 2 weeks ago, and now it has 4 million views. It's just, I mean, it's crazy. Everyone, they just love it, and it's so weird. They quote it, they put memes about it, and only the hip kids know it. And people pray for this shit to happen in their careers. And I just can't believe it happened to me. And I will say this one thing. In my job as an anime writer director, I wrote the scripts and I had to maintain a faithfulness to the original property. I did couldn't change anything. This show, they said, do whatever you want. And I was like, do you know who you're talking to? And they said, yes. And so I was like, okay. And I did it totally free, totally me. It was a risk, but I was like, fuck it, I'm just going to be me. And I didn't know that it would hit. I had no idea that my sense of humor would hit with millions and millions of people. And that's what the lesson I learned from that is that you've got to be, every time, I'm so stupid, it's Hallmark greeting card shit, but you're yourself and you have no idea that fucking like millions of people could be like, that's the guy we were looking for. That's the guy we were waiting for. And you were always timid about showing it. So It's called Ghost Stories, and you can look at it on YouTube. And but if you're a little sensitive to gay jokes, Christian jokes, black jokes, Hispanic jokes, you're not gonna like it.
It's interesting that even though you've seen popularity and all these people watching it now, I don't think a show like that would ever make it to TV nowadays.
Oh no, and that's the big argument on that they talk about in the comments section is like, if this guy did this now, he'd be shot in the head. Or and that's what's so weird about it. It seems like they're a lot of the commenters, and I think the reason they like it is I think we're just about ready for the pendulum to swing back the other way. That we caught it. We were like, yes, Me Too, yes. Black Lives Matter, yes. But there's no sense of humor about anything anymore. And I think the fact that millions of people are liking the show that's not PC, I think it's just our innate nature about like, okay, now can we start making fun of each other again? Can we start like being cool about it instead of being awful about it? And I think this may be a sign that it's going to swing back and will temper, and the water will be warm enough for everybody to be in. It won't boil. It won't be too cool, but that we'll all just be able to like make jokes and crack jokes about things because comics are like feeling restricted. The stand-up comics are just so they don't know what to say. And like Dave Chappelle has been very brave about some of the stuff he's done. And he's gotten very in trouble with the trans community because of some of the jokes he's done. But at the same time, it's like other people are going like, okay, you need to lighten up because we're already, a lot of us are still for you. And it's a bad example because we're not apparently pro-trans yet. But to just know that sometimes a joke is just a joke and there's no really evil intent behind it. Because I know when people say, fag, I know they don't mean anything by it. But if someone else says, you faggot, I know that's totally different. And sometimes you have to look at the heart and the impetus of what the joke is like. At least that's what I think from a comedian writer standpoint.
It's one of the great debates right now, I think. It's like, do we joke about everybody the same, or are there levels of protection when it comes to jokes?
Well, let me ask you this. If there's a sexist joke about like, or a dumb blonde joke or a dead baby joke or something like that, are you offended or do you laugh or do you laugh and then catch yourself and think I shouldn't laugh at this? Or
it's a good question. Now I don't typically get offended, even if it's a redhead joke. But that also comes, from a particular point of privilege because I am a straight white man. Like you could say, like kill all white men, and I'm like, yeah, like whatever. Like you said, it doesn't have that same implication because I'm not oppressed. I don't face levels of discrimination everywhere I go. So,
exactly, we're white male.
Yeah, so I don't get offended. I also, I just because maybe a comedian or a show makes a joke that I find particularly distasteful, I don't cast it out the window. But I can also understand, while I'm a believer in free speech and free ideas and everything, I also understand, why people would feel the way they do about these jokes when they are an oppressed, member of society. So just because I'm not like, oh, we need to cancel all, hate speech and everything, I don't necessarily like believe that, but like, I'm like, okay, like I also understand why, if you could attest to this, that if everyone was like, okay, now we need to go kill all redheads now because redhead people are impure, I wouldn't be sitting there being like, all right, guys, like, let's have a nice conversation about this and try to hash it out, right? Like, I'd be like, we'd be like, no, hell no, you're not killing us because we're redheads. Like, what the hell? So,
Nope, totally right.
I kind of come from this, and I balance again that internal dialogue. I'm like, okay, like I want free speech. I want ideas because I want to know what, bad people are saying and how they got there. But I also understand why it can be a problem for people of marginalized communities. So it's kind of like this, I hear something, I'm like, ooh, yeah, that's going to piss some people off. Like, ooh, but I'm not personally offended by it.
Well, let me. Have you accepted your own redheadedness?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, because it took me for a long time. I was like, I couldn't stand it. I just was like, I didn't like it at all. And it was more than just like everyone hates their body or hates themselves in some way. But it was just like redheads were like, we weren't always accepted, and we were always kind of looked at as freaks. And then I kind of came up to accept it, and there wound up being a lot of people who were like totally get off on gingers. That's
it's a fetish.
Like, you're a ginger. Like, yeah, it's a totally fetish, and so you're like, really, that you're like into? So it's kind of weird. It's it's perspective.
But I've also had women being like, oh, I can't date you because my mom hates redheads or something. Like, it's kind of one of those things.
You never told that. No one ever told you that.
Yeah, someone did. Of a couple people.
But they said, I can't get you because of my mother. That's shit.
Or
that's
like,
horrible.
might have been an excuse. But as a kid, I hated being a redhead, and I dyed my hair twice.
Yeah.
But now, now it's about me balding that like I have my issue with. Listen, you've given me a lot of time, so I really appreciate it. But I do want to end it on like, what's reception been like to this book? How have people responded? How
great.
That's good because it's authentic. Like you said, there's some shit in there that's dangerous.
Oh, people have been the readers have been really very into. I've been very surprised at how people say it's very funny, and also they cry, and it's been very interesting finding out where different parts they cry because no one seemed to be tearing up at the same place, and that they're all imparting themselves into the book, and they're reflecting more on themselves, and it's making them think more about themselves and accept themselves better and like themselves more, and that's the biggest compliment ever. And my biggest dream for the book was that people would read it and they would go like, you know what, I'm not alone. This guy's just like me, or he survived it, I can survive it, or any of those positive feelings, which is great.
If people want to get it, where can they go? Is it Amazon? Is it on? I don't even know what all the book apps are now. In bookstores, where can people find it?
Exclusively on Amazon for 2 more months, and then it'll go wide. And and the audiobook, it's available in paper and Kindle, and the audiobook will come out as soon as I get in the studio and do it. So maybe like right around Christmas.
Oh, that's awesome. And you're gonna voice it yourself?
Yeah, because I'm Excellent. I think fiction should be done by an actor, but if it's nonfiction, the author has to do it. If you just suck, and I suck on the mic, it's going to take me forever, and the producer in me is going to want to make all these edits and things like that, and the director in me is going to be mad at me for doing that, and so. But yeah, I'm going to try it. So we'll see.
Right on. Well, the book is called The Last Alias. Again, true stories and a tale that might be. This has been Ste7en Foster. Ste7en, thank you so much. This has been a really great conversation, and I'm glad we did it.
Thank you so much, Ryan. You've been amazing. Thank you.
You take the red pill. You stay in Wonderland. And I show you how deep the rabbit hole goes.
Welcome to Life in Red.